I'm Sarah, 28. 6 months have passed since my grandfather's will reading, a period that feels like both a dream and a lifetime. The lake house, once a simple cabin, has now transformed into the headquarters of the Henry Thompson Foundation for Environmental Innovation. I'm standing on the dock, watching the morning mist rise off the water, and memories of my grandpa, Henry Thompson, flood back. So much has changed, yet in these quiet moments, he still feels present. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was in the field, collecting water samples for my environmental research, when I received the call about my grandfather's passing. My mother, Victoria Thompson, informed me in a formal, almost business-like tone. There was no comfort, just details about the funeral arrangements and a reminder to wear something appropriate. The funeral was exactly as my mother wanted it, elegant, restrained, and impressive to the right people. She was busy networking with my grandfather's former colleagues, while my sister, Lily, shed precisely 2 tears during the eulogy, looking flawless in her designer black. My father, Robert Thompson, spent most of the reception discussing investment strategies with my grandfather's financial advisors. I stood alone by the photo display, looking at snapshots of my grandfather's life. A week after the funeral, we received notice about the reading of the will. My mother immediately went shopping for appropriate attire, Lily canceled client meetings, and my father researched estate tax implications. I just wanted closure, a final connection to the man who had truly seen me. I didn't expect much in terms of inheritance. My grandfather knew material things weren't important to me. I hoped for some final words of wisdom, maybe his fishing gear or the collection of conservation books we had discussed. The night before the will reading, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my apartment balcony, looking at the stars and remembering how my grandfather had taught me constellations at his lake house. His words, "Some patterns are only visible when you know what to look for," echoed in my mind. Little did I know how prophetic they would become. The next day, we gathered at the offices of Davis, Clark, and Associates, which occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building. The conference room was impressive, with an imposing mahogany table and leather chairs. My mother, Victoria, arrived first, wearing a navy Armani suit. She eyed my simple black dress and whispered that I could have made more of an effort. My father, Robert, followed, checking his Rolex and nodding curtly to Mr. Davis, the attorney. Lily made a grand entrance in stiletto heels, kissing my cheeks and sitting beside our mother. I sat slightly apart, feeling like an outsider in my own family. Mr. Davis wasn't alone. Mr. Harris, my grandfather's best friend of 50 years, sat quietly in a corner chair, and Mrs. Gomez, my grandfather's housekeeper of 20 years, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mr. Davis began by saying that my grandfather was very specific about how the proceedings should unfold. He started with some smaller bequests. Mr. Harris received my grandfather's vintage car collection, and Mrs. Gomez was given a life estate in a guest house on my grandfather's main property and a substantial sum of money. Then came the main distributions. To my mother and father, my grandfather left his primary residence in Beacon Hill and his vacation property in Palm Beach. My mother's smile became genuine, and my father nodded in approval. To Lily, he left a sum of $6.9 million to be distributed in a trust. Lily gasped and squeezed my mother's hand triumphantly. And then it was my turn, Mr. Davis said. To my granddaughter Sarah Thompson, I leave the sum of $1. The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as I struggled to maintain my composure. He also said that I was to receive a sealed envelope to be opened after the reading. I took the thick manila envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting, and my hands trembled slightly. My mother let out a short, sharp laugh, saying, "Well, that's clarifying, isn't it?" Always the disappointment. Lily looked uncomfortable, but the gleam of triumph never left her eyes. My father simply shook his head. Just when my mother was about to leave to celebrate Lily's windfall, Mr. Davis said that my grandfather had prepared a video to be played. My father protested, but Mr. Davis reminded us that it was a condition of the will. All beneficiaries had to be present or risk forfeiting their inheritance. The video started, and my grandfather's face appeared on the screen. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. He thanked Mr. Harris for his honesty over the years and gave the cars to him because he appreciated them for their craftsmanship. To Mrs. Gomez, he said that her kindness had made his house a home. When he addressed my parents, my mother's smile faltered. He said that my mother, Victoria, had always been ambitious, and my father, Robert, was dedicated to the lifestyle he chose. To Lily, he congratulated her on her inheritance but also warned her to use the money wisely. Then he looked directly into the camera and I felt like he was looking right at me. He said, "Sarah, you see what others miss. Remember what I told you about timing and patience? True wealth isn't measured in dollars." He then explained that he had arranged a series of tasks that must be completed before the full terms of his estate could be implemented. Any attempt to contest the will would result in the entirety of his estate being transferred to the Henry Thompson Foundation for Environmental Conservation. The first step began that day, and the envelope I had received contained the key to his lake house and instructions for the first task. After the video ended, my mother quickly recovered and suggested that we accompany me to the lake house. I refused, saying I needed to do it alone first. Lily offered to come with me for support, but I told her I'd call her after. The 2-hour drive to the lake house gave me time to think. I stopped at a rest stop outside Boston to open the envelope. Inside was a key attached to a fish-shaped keychain I had given my grandfather for his 70th birthday, and a letter. The letter said, "Sarah, if you're reading this, the first phase is complete. Go to the lake house alone. In my study, you'll find the answers to questions you haven't thought to ask yet. Remember our chess games. The first move is never the most important one. It's the setup that matters. Trust yourself. Love, Grandpa." When I arrived at the lake house, I was disappointed to see my parents and Lily's cars already there. They said they wanted to join me on this family adventure. I reminded them that the will specified I should come alone, but my father countered that it was only for the initial entry. Once inside the house, my mother complained about the stuffiness and said the place needed a renovation. My father was already assessing the property's value, and Lily was looking at the framed photos with newfound interest. I ignored them and headed towards my grandfather's study. The fish keychain had a second, smaller key that fit the study's lock. In the study, I found a framed photo of a much younger grandfather standing in front of a small office building with the sign, Thompson Innovations. I had never seen it before. My father said he had never heard of it, but there was something in his tone that made me suspicious. On the desk, there was a sheet of paper with a series of numbers and the question, where did it all begin? It looked like a puzzle, with dates followed by dollar amounts. The earliest date was from 50 years ago, 1972, and the amount was $3,000, which resonated with something my grandfather had once told me about his first investment. I sat in my grandfather's chair and opened the desk drawer. Inside was a leather-bound book with first steps embossed on the cover. It was a record of my grandfather's earliest investments, including the $3,000 he had invested in a small technology company in 1972, his first major success. The final entry in the book said, "The truth is in the foundation. Remember to look beneath the surface." My attention was then drawn to a small decorative knight on the desk. When I twisted it, the base came away, revealing a tiny compartment with a small key and a folded note. The note said, "Second letter in the floor safe. Combination date of betrayal." My father was flipping through an old photo album, calling it sentimental nonsense. Several photos slipped out, and as I knelt to gather them, I noticed a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local entrepreneur sells patent for millions." It showed my grandfather shaking hands with another man, and the caption said, "Henry Thompson sells innovative circuit design to Westwood Technologies." I asked my mother if my grandfather had owned a company called Thompson Innovations. She dismissed it as a small venture that didn't amount to much, but her voice had an edge. I found a floor safe in the corner, partially hidden by a small rug. I remembered the date on the newspaper clipping, June 23, 1993, and entered the number 62393 into the safe's combination dial. With a click, the door opened. Inside were another envelope and a small leather notebook. My mother demanded that I open the envelope, but I said I thought I was supposed to read it privately first. My father cut in, saying it concerned the whole family. I reminded them of the will's instructions and the charitable remainder clause. Something in me snapped, and I decided to read the letter first. Lily surprised me by saying I was right and that we couldn't risk triggering the clause. I left the study and went to a small inn in town. The innkeeper, Mrs. Miller, recognized me and was sorry to hear about my grandfather. I told her I needed some quiet to go through my grandfather's papers. In the room, I opened the notebook first. What I found inside stunned me. It was a detailed record of my grandfather's true financial holdings, far more extensive than what had been revealed in the will. Properties across 3 continents, investment portfolios, patents, and business interests totaling well over $24 million. The $1 I had inherited seemed even more symbolic. I then opened my grandfather's letter. He wrote that if I was reading it, I had taken the first step in understanding why things were as they were. The notebook contained the truth about his estate, but money was just money. He told me to investigate Thompson Innovations. The company's records were held by Mr. Davis, and once I understood what had happened there, I'd know why he had structured things the way he did. He also warned me to be careful, saying that the people closest to us can sometimes be the ones we know least. I immediately called Mr. Davis, who wasn't surprised to hear from me. He sent me the Thompson Innovations files securely to my email. As I read through them, a disturbing revelation emerged. My grandfather had founded Thompson Innovations in the early 1990s, developing a revolutionary circuit design. In 1993, he suddenly sold everything to Westwood Technologies for a fraction of its worth. A memo from my father, who had been handling some legal work for the company, showed that he had advised my grandfather that a competing patent would render their technology worthless, recommending an immediate sale. 6 months later, Westwood Technologies used my grandfather's design to launch their most successful product line ever, making billions. And my mother had been working at Westwood Technologies in their acquisitions department at the time. The next morning, I called Mr. Davis again and asked if my grandfather had known about my parents' involvement. He confirmed that my grandfather had discovered the truth about 5 years ago when an old colleague from Westwood came clean. My grandfather had wanted proof before confronting anyone, and he had it all documented in the files. He had also restructured his entire estate plan after learning the truth. I spent the day reviewing everything, and my shock gradually turned into anger. By evening, I drove back to the lake house. My family was sitting on the deck, drinking wine and discussing the development potential of the property. When they saw my face, their conversation stopped. I said, "Or were you reminiscing about Thompson Innovations and how successfully you engineered its sale?" My mother's wine glass nearly slipped from her hand, and my father's face hardened. I placed copies of the most damning documents on the table. My mother's memo to Westwood's CEO outlining my grandfather's vulnerabilities, my father's falsified legal opinion, and the backdated consulting agreement that had paid them nearly $500,000 after the sale. My father demanded to know where I got the documents, and I told him my grandfather had copies all along. Just then, a courier arrived with a special delivery envelope addressed to me. It was a 3rd letter from my grandfather, to be opened when the truth was laid bare. I read the letter aloud. My grandfather said that the will reading was a test, and the true disposition of his estate depended on how each of us had behaved during this process. He had instructed Mr. Davis to arrive at the lake house with a notary and witnesses to document the final phase of his estate plan. Mr. Davis arrived with his associates and played a video showing my parents searching my grandfather's study the previous day, my mother tearing pages from photo albums, and my father making calls about developing the property. He explained that the lake house had been equipped with recording devices for the past week. My mother screamed, claiming it was an invasion of privacy. Mr. Davis then told me that my grandfather had left instructions for me to make the final decision. I could either pursue legal action against my parents for their fraud, which would likely result in criminal charges, or implement the alternative inheritance plan. The alternative plan involved placing the majority of my grandfather's true fortune, over $24 million, into a trust that I would control with ethical oversight provisions. The properties already distributed would remain with their recipients, but all other assets would be managed through the trust. My father looked ashen, and my mother was hysterical. Lily surprised everyone by saying she was tired of the lies and accepted the conditions of the trust, which included honesty, accountability, a family counseling process, and community service hours with environmental organizations for my parents. I spent the night thinking about my grandfather's plan. It wasn't about punishment or justice alone. It was about truth and consequences. In the morning, I called Mr. Davis and asked him to arrange a meeting at the lake house. Everyone gathered in the living room. I stood by the fireplace and read my grandfather's final letter. I said that I had chosen not to pursue criminal charges, but the trust would be implemented as he had designed, with the conditions I had outlined. The journey after that wasn't easy. The first months were brutal. I alternated between anger and doubt, wondering if I had made the right decision. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Lewis helped me navigate my complex grief. My parents initially resisted the conditions. My mother complained bitterly about the community service, but around the 3-month mark, my father called to say that the watershed restoration project was actually interesting. My mother's breakthrough came during a family counseling session. When the therapist asked us to bring a meaningful photograph, I brought a picture of my grandfather and me fishing, Lily brought a candid shot of the 4 of us at her college graduation, and my father chose a formal family portrait. My mother initially said she had forgotten the assignment, but at the end of the session, she pulled a creased photograph from her wallet. It showed her as a young girl, sitting on my grandfather's shoulders at a county fair. She said, "He taught me to be brave." I don't know when I forgot that. Lily's transformation was also remarkable. Initially furious about the conditions attached to her inheritance, she later reduced her hours at the investment firm and began volunteering with one of the foundation's urban education initiatives. She discovered a talent for teaching financial literacy to high school students. 6 months after the will reading, I was hosting a community open house at the foundation headquarters when I spotted my parents across the lawn. They weren't scheduled to be there. My father was examining the solar array with professional curiosity, and my mother was clutching her handbag. When they saw me notice them, my father gave a stiff nod, and my mother attempted a smile. I walked over, and my father said the facility looked impressive. My mother said that my grandfather would have approved. I offered them a tour, and they stayed for almost an hour, asking occasional questions. That evening, I sat in my grandfather's study, now mine, and read his journal. One entry, dated shortly after he discovered the truth about Thompson Innovations, caught my heart. He wrote about the pain of realizing that he could love someone deeply and still not truly know them. He hoped to teach me and Lily the value of integrity. The final page of the journal contained what I now consider my life manifesto. The greatest inheritance isn't money or property or even education. It's the clarity to see truth and the courage to stand for it. Everything else is just details. As I stand on the dock, looking at the water turned golden by the setting sun, I feel my grandfather's presence more strongly than ever. The inheritance he truly left me isn't the money or the property or the foundation. It's the freedom that comes from living authentically, from recognizing that our worth isn't measured in dollars or appearances, but in the courage to see clearly and act with integrity. Have you ever discovered an unexpected truth that changed how you saw your family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of discovering worth beyond money resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and share with someone who might need to hear that their value isn't determined by others' expectations. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and discovery. Remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what's in the bank. It's the wisdom to know what truly matters.